So I'm sitting with Kristina here, and we're going to kick us off with just a snippet I had heard in a recent conversation. Everyone has ADHD now, air quotes. And yes, while that phrase might seem to be everywhere, and I heard it was said to me as kind of like a half joke, half accusation, with some certain fatigue for sure. Like, but what if that reaction of that person when I shared my story tells us less about ADHD and more about the systems we're living in, right? And what
Absolutely.
if in ADHD and neurodivergence, it's not really, in my opinion, about overdiagnosis. Is there such a thing? I don't know. Or trend culture? Like, no. What about like the growing friction between our humanness, how we're built, and norms and expectations and roles deeply shaped by the systems we're in, colonialism, capitalism, Cherokee, and so on. Kristina, I think this is a perfect segue into this. Already, give everyone a glance what's coming at them. So if that's not your jam, please move along. Otherwise, if we ever get off topic, please excuse us. We're in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that most people have heard that response now, like, oh, everybody's autistic or
Yeah,
everybody's
everyone has
ADHD.
ADHD now. It's so trendy.
Yeah, so I mean, I would counter that with two main points. Like one of them is that what we're really seeing is the fallout of decades and decades of medical research that has only been on on white boys essentially
Yeah,
when it comes to neurodivergence and
yeah.
when it comes to
Which
all of
then,
health, right?
yeah.
So really, we don't know anything about the female nervous system because it's never been studied. We
We
don't
don't even know
really
about female hormones.
exactly,
It's not
right.
been done on rat. It's
So what we're seeing, and I think it's partly through social media, what we're seeing is the spread of, what we could look at as masked ADHD or masked autism, especially in populations in which it has been particularly unsafe to display the traits of
yeah.
neurodivergence. So this would include women, it would include trans, non-binary, queer, it would include people of color, right? Anyone who is under a massive amount of societal pressure to appear normal, to appear neurotypical, to conform. I mean, biologically, ADHD shows up differently in women than in boys. Like, the hyperactivity tends to be internal and mental and emotional as opposed to external
It's
and
not
physical.
physical, there's shaking, rocking, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we have the phenomenon of masking, which is, masking is this.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please say more about this because I'm not sure everyone tuning in now has an idea of what we mean when we say masking.
Yeah, so masking is an unconscious adaptation. So you can do it your whole life and not know you're doing it, but it essentially is your nervous system calibrating to the fact that the way your embodiment functions is not welcome. So the way you express emotion, the way you move your body, the way you think, the way you speak, the way you do or do not make eye contact, the kinds of things you like to talk about. If your feedback at a consistent verbal and nonverbal level is from the time you're a child, you're too much, you're wrong, you're different. We don't want to hear that truth. We don't want to feel what you're feeling. We don't want to see you moving the way you're moving. You are a problem. Then what your nervous system does is says, I'm in threat. I'm in threat of being ostracized. I'm in threat of not being cared for, and I will adapt. And so masking is a tremendously complex set of phenomena. It's not only about how am I holding my body, it's about how much eye contact am I making. It's about what are my intonations? Do I smile? Do I not smile? And essentially what
What
it
is
does
the
is
the general social consensus now? Should I make eye contact? Should I not? Is it too much? Is it too strong? We do think about a lot about these.
well, and essentially what that means is, that we learn very early and very unconsciously to be more attuned to the other than we are to ourselves. So in addition to having a nervous system that is already incredibly sensitive and already taking in so much information, we are now disconnecting from our own internal connection to self, and we are attuning to how is this person reacting to me right now? What am I doing that's a problem? What do I do to have to remain safe? And safe can mean socially accepted. It can mean, not physically attacked. It can mean not killed. Like if we look at what it means,
Yeah.
for example, for a Black man with neurodivergence to mask, you know, his life could be at stake.
Yes.
right? Or if you look at just what it means to be a woman who speaks truth bluntly,
Mm.
right? Which we
Love those.
will predispose us to, like, where we're told very, very early on, don't,
Yeah.
that's not permitted. So masking is,
Yeah.
yeah, incredibly complex and all pervasive and very, very deeply physiologically, psychologically, spiritually damaging. And what's happening now is that we are seeing all the masked neurodivergent people. So all the people who, we're seeing them on social media. They're writing books. There's a fantastic book called Unmasking Autism by a trans author, Devon Price, right? So they go through all the populations.
Kind of like if you're allowed, like Googling, no, don't just listen to us talking and we'll go to the show.
So, I mean, we're now seeing all the populations that have been not only neglected by medical science, but also socially conditioned to suppress and to hide our.
Mm.
And so that is, my understanding is so that accounts for the surge in diagnosis. The other thing is that we're in late stage capitalism. And so all of the systems that have always been working against life, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, colonization, they are at their peak, they're at their zenith. And so everyone is impacted now, except, arguably the billionaires.
The rich white male billionaires, but everyone,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And so those of us who have, a brain that's 42% more active and a nervous system that's far more porous, and, so we are going to be more symptomatic. We are the canaries in the coal mine, right? Our sensitivity is a reflection of the fact that, look, we're reaching peak death cult in Western culture, where,
Mhm.
everything is set up to sustain extraction and to destroy life. And so I would argue that that is also reflected in the increase in diagnoses, because
Mm.
it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable to live within these systems.
Absolutely. Like we're seeing like, I mean, on so many levels, right? We're seeing like so many people I talk to are exhausted, like truly, not just like tired. Like we love a good tired, but emotionally exhausted. Um, to the point where they really have a hard time to even just not practice, but knowing what true rest is. And to be fair, like I mean, I'm born in I grew up in the 80s, 90s. And that time, like it was a time where only boys have ADHD. Girls do not. And now looking back, I have like entries in school report cards of like, well, good grades, but talks a lot. Or like talks super loud all the time. Where I'm like, well, the signs were there, I suppose. So it's really now kind of coming into um that into kind of like that awareness. And another thing, and it comes into awareness for me specifically at this particular moment in time because I'm entering or I am in perimenopause and that messes with my brain a
Yes.
lot. And so the masking gets even more harder. It uses so much more brain power to the point where my ADHD comes true
Yeah.
after like 40 years of masking. So, yeah, that is also an effect, I believe. That's not like scientific backed, might be interesting too, because
Oh, it
this
is.
entire generation of women, perimenopause, and now coming into like, oh, wait, maybe. And then I had a son diagnosed with medically diagnosed with ADHD. And then I went into check ins. They sent me, well, your textbook. This is actually textbook. You have a kid with ADHD. You know it's genetic and epigenetic. You're in menopause and you have all these weird symptoms. So this might be another thing. So if you think this is not just perimenopause, there you go. Something to think about.
Yeah, as the estrogen drops, the way we can mask much, much less. So the sort of textbook ways that ADHD manifests, they're amplified for sure in perimenopause.
Yeah. This brings me to like the whole masking thing. I think this is a good way into you've already said it. We mask to feel safe. And a lot of this happens for us in our formative years. So up until the age of 7. So it was really at a crucial point of where we feel if we do not belong to this nuclear family, we'll be dead because we cannot sustain ourselves. So we really have so that's kind of like that part. We mask because we feel safe. And of course we to that part is we mask towards something, and we mask towards this idea of what
Yes.
normal normal brains, normal behavior, normal people should do, should talk like, should dress like. Like, it goes through all kind of layers. Like, how do we like start clean this up? Do we have to look at it historically?
Yes.
Where do we start cleaning this mess up?
Yeah, so just for a bit of context, my middle son was diagnosed with ADHD years ago, and actually, in 2024, I was doing a deep dive to better understand him
Mm,
when I self-diagnosed with autism, and then later went to a clinician, and she said, "No, it's autism and ADHD." And then part of what I did to process my own diagnosis was do this really deep dive. I have 13 years of experience as a psychotherapist, but in all of my training, advanced training, none of the neurodivergence was not covered. So I did a really deep historical dive into the history of psychiatry and the construction of normalcy. Like, who decided what normalcy is, what sanity is, and what are the criteria? And if
mhm.
we look back at this construction, it is so far from neutral, right? It is so deeply, deeply entwined with patriarchy and norms. Sanity is the rational, civilized white male. And what does that mean? Emotionally cauterized, spiritually dead, right? Like, these are the constructions, and we can look back at the construction of sanity, that had to have the other. So the woman was
The
always representative
hysterical.
of the irrational, the hysterical, right? And we can go back before hysteria to the witch burnings, right? So essentially, women become pathologized because we don't support empire, or more precisely, we are needed to be the resources for empire. All of our
Technically
unpaid
needed.
labor, all of everything that we do to support and nourish life, it's needed, but it is not going to be valued. So the witches were burned because they were opposed to the introduction of capitalism into Europe, right? That was the death of the
Mhm.
destruction of indigenous Europe was the rise of capitalism. And so the witch, the other, the feminine, gets constructed as primitive, uncivilized, irrational, dangerous, and she gets also bound up with the ways in which indigenous cultures, African cultures, are being constructed to justify colonization, right? So you have the
No,
uncivilized, primitive, overly sensitive, overly intuitive, nonlinear beings, right? Who all have to be suppressed and used as resources for empire. And then you have the construction of the civilized self, who is desensitized and quote unquote rational and linear and controlled. And in fact,
and
deeply,
the acceptance
deeply,
of this hierarchical structure.
yes, deeply dissociated and deeply traumatized and very, very ill. And
Mm,
that's been the binary
mhm.
that has created the life destroying structures that all of our institutions are built in. So sanity, has been constructed in service to patriarchy and in service to colonization and white supremacy and empire. And the church and all the ways in which the church has participated in that. So if we look at these textbooks, like you look at the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that's used in a lot of North America to determine what are the symptoms, where do we get these diagnoses from, and they look like these neutral objective texts, but they are arising out of this social context. And when you look at, for example, indigenous or African societies in which we would call quote unquote mentally ill, are actually people who are connected to spirit, or who are connected to other layers of,
Mm.
who have a conscious
Or
connection.
possessed by spirit, but in it, like, not in
Yes.
a not in a bad connotation, possessed. Like,
Yes. Yeah. So the church also constructed sanity. The church came to Turtle Island, North America, and said, you are primitive, you are possessed by demonic spirits. Why? Because you communicate and have reciprocal relationships with non-human intelligence. Because you honor and communicate with rivers and mountains and animals, and you are participating in this wider web of intelligence. We don't believe in that. We believe that's demonic, right? So you see the construction of sanity there too. And a lot of the properties of neurodivergence, ADHD has the word disorder in it. autism spectrum disorder, they are deemed disordered because they exemplify a lot of these qualities: nonlinear perception,
Yeah.
profound sensitivity, justice sensitivity, you know, integrity, alignment with moral
Yeah.
truths as opposed to superficial performed personalities, right?
Yeah. It's really a
Resistance to
big
hierarchy.
due to like our perceptions of time, space, pace, the whole shenanigans.
Because we are not wired to comply. And I want to be clear that we are all susceptible to social conditioning. So this is not about neurodivergent people being morally superior or immune to being conditioned into white supremacy and all kinds of supremacy and sickness. However, physiologically, we are not wired to comply.
Mm.
We are not wired to fit these systems. And so attempting to comply comes at a much, much higher physiological cost. And to the extent that we actually risk being our authentic selves, we are a problem. We are a problem to conformity, to hierarchy,
Prone
and
to
to all the
control, like
systems.
hard to control.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That is interesting that you said like about this moral compass. Like I see, like I always knew this about myself, and I already see this in my son. He's 6 years old, and when something goes against his grain, there is just no way he's gonna do this. Like he has this very clear inner north star or compass, who's like no, yes, like
Mhm.
this is undiluted, like super, like dang, this is it. And I know, or I've learned to kind of like really go with my first kind of like somatic reaction to something. And if it's like, then it's a no. And I have to kind of like speak this before my logic or my ego or whatever comes in and be like, no, but you could because then it's, I don't know, more socially acceptable, blah, 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 blah. So it's really interesting to kind of like have to see this also in my younger son of like just how can I let him be undiluted for as long as possible.
And I think to me, and that's one of the most painful things about parenting was like, okay, I have to take these humans, who are born so connected to themselves, so connected to life, and I have to put them into systems that I know from experience were so contorting and stultifying and damaging. Like, so I have to put them in the school system, and I know the school system is based on compliance, and I know the school system was actually developed to create compliant factory workers, right? That it's there to dull creativity and to make us obedient. And I think it's really devastating as a parent to try to navigate that. Like the reality is that most of us don't have the leisure or the temperament or the training or the financial capacity to school our kids at home. But we're really, and even if we do that, we still have to introduce them to this broken society at some point. But it is, yeah, it's a very painful clash that's really visible with young children.
Yeah.
Is how do I put this child into an environment in which they're going to be told to do precisely the opposite of what you just named, which is they're going to be told to override and ignore what their body is telling them.
Yeah.
And especially for boys, the desensitizing and the shaming around sensitivity, around intuition, around emotion, around vulnerability, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think it's what I mean, we've talked about if like what we're gonna do and we knew, okay, yeah, we don't have the capacity to homeschool. Even though my like his dad, my partner, is a teacher and also a special needs teacher. So we would have like some ideas. But what is really mind boggling is that it comes down to really this singular instance of how is the teacher of your child, because when you have someone there who is really accepting of what is going on, you're so much better off, of
Yes.
course, because they're defined against their system per se. So we decided to send them into school and we set really really clear boundaries of we're going for knowledge, like with any kind of homework or tests or whatever kind of shenanigans that they're doing in first grade, which is nonsense anyway. We're testing for knowledge, not compliance. We had
Mhm.
this argument with our teacher so many times. Like, she sent homework back, like, the circles are supposed to be blue, but they're red. I'm like, well, did he color in the right amount of circles? Yes. Then I don't give a shit. Testing for compliance. Don't care. Um, of like all these really things, and they're daily battles. It's insane. But I'm not sure if he would be better off like completely, removed from the system, because as you said, there will be a point when he will enter the systems, and I don't think we're going to see the destruction and the dismantling of capitalism in the next 15, 20 years.
Mm.
Unless something really rapid cascades. But
Mhm.
maybe not. Maybe not. Who knows? So he
Who
would
knows at this
know.
point? We're in an
I
unprecedented moment.
thought international law was a thing, but apparently not. So, but no, we're getting off topic. But this is kind of like one thing of, I think we really touched a lot on really important parts where we had this, I kind of brought this in of that it really comes down to like who within a system you're working with. So sometimes it really helps to switch class or switch schools.
Mhm.
But I remember um we had one conversation and that was rubbing me so wrong, the wrong way. Oh my God. Was this whole notion of, well, we don't really look at like neurodivergence as deficits, which is fine. Um, but they're like, it's your superpower. And especially when you're in the online world, TikTok, Instagram, you have a lot of people who are like, oh, ADHD is my superpower. And I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I excuse me. I think there is a kernel of truth to that because there are tremendous gifts that are associated with neurodivergence, including, innovation, creativity, nonlinear thinking, the capacity to see truths that others don't, deep passion, hyperfocus. I think these are gifts to the individual, they're gifts to society, but they cannot be taken out of the context that neurodivergence within the existing structures of our society is a disability. Now, it's not a medical disability in the sense that there is no inherent deficit. That's true. There's nothing wrong. It is not a disorder. It is not a deficit. However, according to the social definition of disability, which is it's the interaction of an individual with a system, right?
Yes.
And when as a neurodivergent person with ADHD or autism or both interacting with a society that was built for the neurotypical brain, we are disabled. And when we downplay that, we downplay the reality that, for example, ADHD takes 13 years off your life expectancy. That's more than diabetes. And this is the downside to it being viewed as a trend or a social media meme is that we don't recognize like the percentage of people with ADHD in prison, for example, or with addiction or the risk of suicidality for
Yeah.
neurodivergent.
I
Like
mean,
these
there is
are,
that, right? You have such a incredibly higher risk of being incarcerated, being addicted to whatever kind of substance there, like drugs,
yeah.
alcohol, shopping. What the list is endless.
Mhm. And that is because of the failure of our society to accommodate any difference in nervous systems. It is because our society has been built for this constructed version of human, which honestly really doesn't exist for anyone. It's not healthy for anyone, right? To be a compliant worker, to be a cog in a machine, but it lands with much more force on more sensitive nervous systems and brains. So the superpower it's a piece of the picture, but it's not the whole picture.
100%. And what I always kind of like ask in this like superpowered like conversation is like, well, you pick out very specific parts of superpowers, right? And who benefits from reframing those as like superpowers, right?
Mhm.
Reframing innovation, reframing like high pressure thinking or fast thinking, fast reaction. Like those are very high capitalistic traits of human behavior that you
Yes.
pick out. So it's almost kind of like, well, who benefits if you frame it like that? Just kind of like
Yeah.
something for everyone to think about is always like who benefits if we do something.
Yeah, that's a great point, and what I see in that, when it's framed as
Mm.
a superpower, sometimes I see something really healthy, which is someone who is seeking to move out of the shame
Yeah.
that they've
Yes,
been
that's
living
good.
with their
Yes.
entire life. They've been pathologized their entire life, and they're reframing that, and that you need to flip the script. You need to say, "Actually, everything you have not valued in me has tremendous value." And so
Yes.
that move has like is important to make as part of the trajectory of healing and combating gaslighting.
Yes.
However, it is also, like you said, it falls very much in line with like very extractive, like you are valuable because you can provide something to other people, because you can provide innovation, or we can extract or benefit from your innovation. And it also, I think that the challenge is that people then also will say, well, I love you when you're up and you're the life of the party and you have all this energy, but I don't want to see the burnout or the meltdown. I know I'm not there for that. That doesn't interest me. I just want the superpower piece, right? As opposed to, well, this is the complexity of, ADHD in
Oh,
particular is extremes in experience, like extreme highs that, yes, can be incredibly uplifting and powerful and ecstatic and amazing, and also very, very deep lows of like,
you need someone to hold your hand through the lows.
yeah, yeah. And you need to recognize that they are two pieces of the same whole. They are two sides of the same coin. We can't just take one and leave the other one.
Yeah. Like I totally see on a very individual level that the reframe as superpower or a strength is incredibly healing and powerful. Yes. And it needs to ripple outwards back into like the social sphere, the community sphere. Like we cannot individualize ADHD, meaning like it just becomes like another neoliberalism trope, right? Like, oh, I just have to fix my mindset. I just have to think ADHD is my superpower. ADHD is my superpower. Affirmations
Yeah.
on steroids. And then everything will be fixed. No, that's not how this works. Like, what
Mm-mm.
gets erased when we individualize ADHD instead of addressing the very real structural barriers?
Absolutely. And I think, again, it's, like when I was creating the Neurodivergent Rising course, I was sitting with, okay, am I going to provide tools for people? Like, am I going to provide ways that we can work with our strengths and also support ourselves through our challenges? And I just instinctively felt like, no, that's not my role. Like, there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of people doing amazing work that are
Mhm.
helping with precisely like how to adapt, how to support yourself in various ways. And my approach was, no, we got to look at the systems. We have to look at the context out of which we've been labeled disordered, and we have to look at how they're set up against us because they're set up against all of our thriving. And we have to look at systematically
Yes.
how this is playing out. That's
Yeah.
where the change is going to come. Doesn't mean we abandon what we can do for ourselves individually, but again,
No, it's
the
kind of like as
individualism is
a
the frequency of the problem.
first medical response. Like you have a strong bleed and you need to put a band-aid on, right? That's the whole superpower mantra. You put the band-aid on, but then you kind of like have to stop the bleed. The band-aid will not like stop the arterial bleed. So
Mhm.
we have to kind of like, yeah, address the structures we're in because that's the same thing like in general mental health, not just neurodivergence, but like mental health in general. You can do a fucking resilience training and affirmations and positive psychology the whole fucking day. If you're still within these harmful systems, there's only so much you can do. And
Yeah.
yes, you should be doing that. But again, neoliberalism told us that's enough, which it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and that again just supports the existing structures, right? If you're so focused on your individual healing, this is part of what I woke up to within my role as a psychotherapist, was this real tension between the really powerful things that can happen when you do trauma therapy and you shift internal relationships with
Mm.
different parts of yourselves, you metabolize trauma, But the reality that if we treat that as the end of the story, then we're participating in the system, right? We're just continuing to comply with and
It
participate
has
with the
to ripple
system that
outwards.
wants us to believe the problem is individual and not systemic.
Yes. This is I don't know. I feel this is already the perfect way to kinda like the closing words. But I I'm curious. This is something I hear a lot. I'm a sociologist and people always come from me with like, well, what can I do? Like I can't fight the system. Like, well, you can always fight the system. But I get the sentiment that sometimes it's really it's hard and it's hard by design to really distill down, okay, what can I do to really um bring along a certain change in how I don't know, how neurodivergent people in my immediate circle move through life.
So I think a lot of it is deprogramming. Like
Mm,
again, when I created the course, it was like I think we are devastated by the lack of accurate information about ourselves, the
mm,
lack of exposure to other neurodivergent people and sharing the experience from the inside instead of pathologizing it,
mm,
and also the recognition of how biased our conception of normal is. So we have to begin to unpack because we've internalized the oppression, we've internalized the shaming, the insufficiency, the disorder. So as we dismantle that in ourselves, already that is a political act because it is going to shift how we view ourselves and how we interact with neurodivergent people and neurotypical people. So the dismantling of the system is in part an internal one because it shifts what we embody, the choices we make, how we speak. For me, it also meant a radical lifestyle shift. And this is, coming out of, I didn't self-diagnose till 50. So a lot of damage has been done to my nervous system by powering through, by operating on cortisol. So it's taking certain stands and making certain choices about, well, I'm not going to participate in hustle culture. I'm not going to try to meet demands that continually land me in freeze and fawn and a trauma response. And then it shows up on like, what do you post on social media and how do you interact with your medical doctor? Do you hold them accountable? Do you suggest that maybe they read an article about neurodivergence and about the comorbid conditions?
mhm.
If you're, however you are, wherever your place of employment is, like, so yes, maybe it is lobbying certain organizations, maybe it is insisting on accountability from teachers or medical professionals or therapists, but all of this is, it's going to show up differently in each of us and all of it is going to ripple. So if you teach yoga, how do you accommodate we all have a role to play and it's not going to look the same. It's not going to look like marching in the streets for everybody. There are many, many ways to be part of a revolution in consciousness.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful, and I think maybe I just want to highlight one thing you said before, and it relates to like what we can do. And you've said it. You mentioned shame before, and you also mentioned language, and I think both things are we can put together, and it's just really powerful if we kind of like. I mean, shame drives it when we kind of like treat our capacity to do things, and when they treat us character, right? And what I did, like this whole thing of like lazy, unfocused, inconsistent, not trying hard enough, right? We all like, I'm sure this sounds familiar in some sort of way of really like detaching the I am lazy, I am unfocused to kind of like, I have a hard time focusing right now.
Hmm.
These really subtle shifts of decoupling something I do with how I am, my character, to really be like, oh, like my capacity fluctuates. I have a hard time focusing right now, or this task requires support, capacity, whatever I don't currently have. I think that
Hmm.
we can do on a very, very individual, like small, like layer that has tremendous potential.
Absolutely. And I think that self-talk can shift also as a result of actually understanding the physiology, which is so the ADHD brain doesn't release dopamine under the same conditions that the neurotypical brain does. It releases dopamine, which we really need unless we want to run on cortisol and burn our nervous system out. We need the dopamine, the natural motivation. That is released in response to novelty, passion, challenge, urgency, not in response to delayed gratification, routine. So there's a reason why, there's a reason why my employment history looks the way it does, right? Because I have had to follow my passion. I've
Mhm.
tried to work against that. I have
Yeah.
tried for the sake of
That was
financial
yeah.
security
Yeah.
very hard
For the
for
corner
my
off.
entire life. Yearned to be normal, right? Yearned to be someone who could comply and have the security that comes from complying. But now that I see, oh my God, I've been literally going against my brain, and my brain has been steering me in the direction of my purpose in this lifetime. And there's nothing wrong with that. And what it means is there's going to be a lot of friction with tasks that are meaningless, that don't serve humanity, that don't serve life, that don't light me up, that don't feel like a worthy expenditure of my energy. And that's actually something quite beautiful to me,
Mhm.
right? Which is that I cannot go against meaning or passion or challenge,
And why
right? I
would
cannot
you want that?
yeah, I cannot slip into a mundane and superficial life. When I've tried very hard, but the physiological cost is so high and escalating that it is unsustainable. So I think, knowing the physiology, also stepping outside all the stereotypes we've been presented, which are deeply flawed, and witnessing other neurodivergent people speak from within their experience, and reading books by neurodivergent people about neurodivergence. I mean, this is what enables us to come out of the paralysis of I am broken, I am disordered, I should be other than I am. And that, in my experience, actually, that opens a kind of internal cage, and it's not a one time thing, and it's a slowly evolving process. What I've really come to see over the last year is how profoundly rooted that internal pathologizing voice is. I
Mhm.
wake up in the morning and I'm already behind. I haven't been productive. I'm not, my day doesn't unfold the way it's supposed to look. I can't transition between 8 different things in one day. I
Mm.
need a good, long, deep period of hyperfocus to feel fulfilled. And so all of that, my whole life has felt like, well, I'm like everything you said, lazy, undisciplined, there's a problem. And now that I'm changing the self-talk and the conception, it is shifting my entire life
Yeah.
in ways that are very frightening, but are also profoundly liberating, and that other people are responding to. Because
Mm.
there's something here when we trust what our nervous system is telling us, when we trust that it's aligning us with something powerful and beautiful and meaningful, then we're less at risk of the shame, the pathologization, the addiction, all the unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? The burnout, etc.
And that's really, yeah, I think this is really all very helpful to kind of just show little cracks here and there. And we all know the cracks are where the light gets in.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So I feel like I always try to, we do a lot of I don't know, a lot of rightful bashing of systems here. And sometimes this feels heavy for some of us, dear listeners always tell me oh, this was very depressing episode. And I'm like, I'm sorry, not sorry. It is what it is. But I feel this is we'll have to do on a rather hopeful note. So I hope you
Hmm.
all appreciate it. Um, so, Christina, tell us where people can find you. I know you mentioned Neurodivergent Rising one or
Yes.
two times. Do you want to tell us something about it? I think it's your kind of your. I'm not going to say program because I think it's kind of more an initiation.
It is. So it is, I mean, technically it's an online course, but I really built it to be less of a course and more of an experience and an initiation. So it's 9 weeks, it's online, it's self-paced, but we do have weekly live meetings. So there's lots of opportunity to connect to me and to other participants, both with the live meetings and the course platform. And essentially, this is a course about neurodivergence that centers neurodivergent people. So not only did I compile hours of video footage of neurodivergent people from around the world sharing their experiences, but we have 9 phenomenal international guests from very different social contexts who are living, in alignment with their truth. And that's not easy. It's not simple, but it's incredibly potent to witness. So yeah, so I'm not pretending to be a representative for neurodivergence. It was absolutely pivotal to me with the systemic lens and with an intersectional awareness that there be an incredibly diverse group of neurodivergent people represented. So essentially, we learn the physiology, we learn why the word disorder is false, and we learn the historical context for how sanity and normalcy have been constructed. And so it's a course that's aimed primarily at neurodivergent adults who either have a diagnosis, are self-diagnosed, or suspect they may be, and then also at the people, the people who love us and the people who serve us professionally. So, therapists, social workers, clinicians, parents, anyone, and anyone really who's ready to deconstruct what we have internalized about what is sane and what is human, and what is healthy. And so we do a really deep decolonizing dive, but every module really is crafted so that you are emotionally engaged and you are reflecting on your own experience. It is not passively absorbing information. We are perpetually reflecting on our own experience, our internalized oppression as neurodivergent people, and our internalized privilege according to our intersection of identities.
Yeah.
And we're processing the emotion that comes up because this is how we transform. We have to feel. We have to feel. And we have to reflect upon and come to new insights and process the emotion and witness each other in order to move forward. I taught it live in the fall. The new cohort just launched last week. We're still accepting people into this cohort. There's lots of time to join us, and then the next one will launch in March. And it has been incredibly transformative for me to build it, to teach it, and I can feel it even as I'm teaching it again. So it's an amazing community. We have people from all around the world, and it's truly beautiful and very, very powerful to be witnessing each other in this way. Yeah.
This sounds really amazing because especially so many of us, me included, it takes one to know one, have relied heavily on their brain and of knowing, of intellectualizing. And there's so many things, I'm glad you put this up. We have to feel our way through and out
Hmm.
and not rationalize our way out because that shit's not working. So
Exactly.
thank you so much, Christina, for sharing your wisdom with us on a scenic route. We're of course going to link everything in the show notes as the course, the book, everything mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so amazing, and it just went by like that. It was lovely talking to you.